When it comes down to it, it is a rather kingly power. Even the founders, so opposed to a monarchy, put it right there in the Constitution. Article 2, Section 2, the president has the authority to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States. To pardon someone is to completely circumvent the will of juries and courts, presumably in the name or spirit of forgiveness and mercy and second chances. So what happens when that power, a relic of 7th century England, is completely, publicly, brazenly corrupted? I'll let you decide for yourself. There are 3 cases to consider just today. First, that of Todd and Julie Chrisley. Viewers of reality TV might know their names. In 2022, a jury in a federal trial found them guilty of fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy to defraud the United States. Their sentence, 12 years for Todd, 7 years for Julie. Pretty cut and dry, case closed, see you in 7 and 12 years. Until in February, the couple sought presidential pardons. Here's the appeal made by their daughter without evidence on Fox News last month.
Originally, they were not going to prosecute because they said it was very weak. They didn't have the evidence that they needed to prosecute, that it wasn't a case. It took 9 years to issue a federal indictment. Both prosecutors were Democrats. They have donated to Democratic candidates. And at trial, we knew it was game over.
Fast forward to this afternoon, and the Chrisleys are now expecting a pardon as soon as today from Donald J. Trump. Now, stick a pin in that one, and let's look at another. It took just 2 hours for a jury to convict Scott Jenkins, the former sheriff of Culpeper County, Virginia, on all counts in what is called a cash for badges scheme. The government's evidence included undercover video showing Jenkins accepting more than $75,000 in exchange for providing law enforcement authority to local businessmen. And despite the fact that Jenkins argued he was targeted because of his conservative politics, it was a jury of his peers that convicted him and sentenced him to 10 years in prison. You can probably guess where this one's going. This week, Donald Trump announced he is pardoning Scott Jenkins, insisting he too was a victim of an overzealous Biden Department of Justice that just so happened to prosecute Hunter Biden too. Okay. But there's more. There's what happened this afternoon. Asked about pardons for the man convicted of plotting to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, here's Donald Trump.
I'm going to look at it. I will take a look at it. It's been brought to my attention. I did watch the trial. It looked to me like somewhat of a railroad job. I'll be honest with you. It looked to me like some people said some stupid things. You know, they were drinking, and I think they said stupid things. But I'll take a look at that. And a lot of people are asking me that question from both sides, actually. A lot of people think they got railroaded. A lot of people think they got railroaded. And probably some people don't.
A lot of people, both sides. Okay. Well, these 3 cases, separate individuals, separate cases, serve to illustrate a new reality in America that we have to face one way or the other. No longer are pardons issued to the people who deserve them most. They are now officially, brazenly, issued to people who adequately suck up to the only person in our government able to provide pardons. And do not take our word for it on this one. Take theirs. In a social media thread dedicated to thanking Donald Trump for pardoning that sheriff we mentioned, Ed Martin, the U.S. pardon attorney, writes this, quote, "No MAGA left behind," end quote. It's where we start today with some of our favorite experts and friends. Former U.S. Attorney, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Harry Litman is here. Also joining us, former Department of Justice pardon attorney Liz Oyer, who was fired in March, joins us today. And with me at the table for the hour, MSNBC senior political analyst Alex Wagner is here. Alex, I want to start with you and the importance of sort of taking our slack jaws off the table and moving these stories forward in terms of understanding what they mean for everybody else, not just the Trump fans who received these 3 pardons.
Well, it's the most sort of out in the open confirmation that there exist 2 systems in this country, and Trump has firmly established them in broad daylight. One for the wealthy and the well-connected and the allegiant, and the other for everybody else. And that needs to be hammered home again and again and again. And it follows through not just from the pardons to the tax code, to literally to the every
to the tariffs.
The tariffs. There are Trump and his people and everybody else. And that, to me, for Democrats, seems like a very potent line of attack. But there's something else, I think, Nicole, that is equally worth pointing out, which is that I think Trump is able to do this, not just because he likes giving favors to people who say they like him, but because I think he sees some of himself in all these people, in these grifters and con men and women and cheats. I mean, this is a person who, at the same time that he's doing this, is using the White House to make money for Trump organizations and his children. I mean, the New York Times reported that last month, Trump-affiliated businesses brought in $2 billion. This is personal enrichment, the likes of which we have not seen in American history. David Frum says that this is corruption on the level of a post-Soviet republic. I mean, that is what is happening in this country under the watchful eye of Donald Trump. And I think this is very much an extension of that because, as you know, with everything Trump, it's a reflection as much of his own desires.
A projection.
Exactly. Yeah. As it is anything else.
I want to ask you, Liz, to level set us, because I think sometimes these stories come absent a baseline. And can you just tell us what is supposed to happen so we can measure how beyond the pale abnormal these three pardons are?
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. So there is a process that is in place and has been in place for a very long time for applying for a presidential pardon. And the reason this process exists is to ensure that the pardon power is not totally politicized and corrupted in the manner that is happening now. There is an office, the Office of the Pardon Attorney, which is dedicated to reviewing and vetting applicants for pardons. Individuals from around the country who are seeking presidential pardons apply through the office, wait their turn for their application to be vetted, and the office makes a very thorough and comprehensive recommendation in every single case to the president. Those are ordinary Americans who are going through that process, and many of them are actually very deserving of the relief that's provided by pardons. They include individuals who were sentenced under mandatory minimum laws that are now defunct, that no longer exist. Many of them are serving life sentences in prison, and many of them have demonstrated that they have earned a presidential pardon through exemplary conduct and character in years and years that have passed since their convictions. All of that has fallen by the wayside under the current administration. There is no process that's being followed, and it appears to require some sort of inside connection or access or willingness to pay to be able to obtain the benefit of a presidential pardon.
What, Liz, crosses the line into what, under normal times, without a publicly and brazenly politicized Department of Justice, what, if anything, is illegal, even for a president?
Well, unfortunately, the pardon power is very unconstrained. The president does have the constitutional power to pardon anyone that he chooses. And for that reason, it's very important that this process is followed so that it's not totally corrupted in the way that it is now. The Department of Justice has a comprehensive, detailed set of guidelines in place that it follows or is supposed to follow in recommending pardons to the president. And I can tell you that there is not a single person who has received a pardon from President Trump who meets those criteria that apply in ordinary times. And President Trump has appointed a pardon attorney who has demonstrated that he does not feel bound by those decades and decades of guidance that have always applied. Ed Martin is the first political appointee ever to occupy the position of pardon attorney, which has historically always been occupied by a career employee of the Department of Justice.